The Walking Dead Season 2 has now finished, and as promised, I will review the whole thing right here. Telltale Games, The Walking Dead Season 2. So The Walking Dead Season 2 is brought to us by the masters of pointing and clicking and talking to people. It's Telltale Games, and it's the story of Clementine. In the first one, she was the little girl Lee had to protect. And this one, this is all about Clementine coming into her own, becoming mature, and ultimately relishing in it. Or at least you relishing in the fact that she has to do that. Because there are a couple of calls you have to make, you're like, you know what, I don't care, I'm doing that. Clementine doesn't need to be protected by someone who's trying to shelter her. Clementine needs to survive. And that's actually really cool. I like that dynamic in this series. This one took a couple of episodes to get going. I enjoyed the first couple of episodes, but ultimately it's episode 3 and 4 that are the peak of everything. 5 had a couple of moments in it. I really liked it. A couple of heartbreaking moments depending on how you play it. But for me, it was 3 and 4. That was the shit. And spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil a few things for you in this one. I'll tell you when the spoilers happen. Because in episode 3, there's this dude. This is a spoiler alert for episode 3. This guy runs this camp. He's a complete dick. He treats it like a prison, and you guys are all in cells, and you're like, we don't like it here. This guy's an asshole. He makes this one guy slap his daughter. He's like, do it. Slap her hard. We'll wait. I'm like, ugh. So when the time comes, Kenny's gonna beat his ass to death with a crowbar and Clementine can go or stay. And I was like, you know what? Lee wouldn't want her to watch this, but Lee ain't here. And I watched it, and it was great because he was a dick, and I'm glad he's dead. Yeah, Kenny comes into it. Kenny comes into it in episode 2, and it was so awesome. You see Kenny was ultimately the one in season 1 where you're like, well, you're a little unstable, but you know, we like you until we don't like you because you have problems, but we still love you until the end. And you thought he died, and now he's in it. When you see him, I'll never forget this feeling. It's like you see him and it's like, oh, holy shit, familiarity, family, hug me. Until Kenny starts having problems again, and you're like, I think Kenny's unstable. People are like, Kenny's changed. Like, he has changed. Well, really, he hasn't changed at all. He's always kind of been like that, but, you know, same old, that old Kenny. I'll tell you what happened in The Walking Dead Season 2 for me. I started to become wise to the axe, and I didn't like that. One of my friends was watching me play, and he chose different paths from me. Spoiler alert for episode 4 and 5. This lady gives birth to a kid. She's really weak. Do you leave now, or do you leave in 5 days? Doesn't matter. Either way, she dies. And when she dies, everyone's like this Mexican standoff, like Reservoir Dogs and shit happening. When she dies, you notice that she's coming back to life as, well, not life. She's coming back as a zombie, and the baby's in her hands. I just straight up shot her in the head, and then everyone started shooting everyone. That's when the episode ended. It was a firefight. It was a massacre. And my friend told me he called for help, in which someone else shoots her in the head, and then it's a firefight and it's a massacre. Same outcome, although you pick something, you know, see what I mean? I didn't like the fact that I started getting wise to that act. After playing 3 of these Telltale games, you start going, wait a minute, it all just kind of leads to the same thing. Like that Russian kid I run into, I didn't rob him. I was like, nope, we're not gonna rob him today. Here are your supplies. And I said, ooh, he'll remember that. That's great, but he didn't ever remember that. He was like, oh, that's the girl that robbed me. I was like, I didn't rob you, someone else did. By the end of the game, he ends up shooting Clementine in the shoulder anyway, so I was like, I might as well have robbed him. Didn't feel like it mattered. And that really hit me in the face when Kenny came back. I love the fact that he was back, and then I was like, wait a minute, does that mean you live in everyone's rendition of The Walking Dead? Same outcome, he drops into the alley and, holy shit, wait. And it kind of ruined the magic for me. It's like seeing behind the curtain of an illusion. You're like, oh, it's not as special as I remember it being. Doesn't change the fact that you're left with a story that is really engaging, and by the end you cry. Because that's just how these Walking Dead games are. They're really emotional, you get attached to the characters. I ultimately, the first ending, I got a shit ending. I was like, well, that was kind of anticlimactic. And then I heard that the better ending is an ending. Oh, spoiler alert for episode 5. I'm spoiling the whole thing at this point. This one chick's like, oh, the baby's dead, but she just hid the baby from Clementine so Clementine could see Kenny rage out and ultimately have Kenny murder this lady. Then you find out the baby's alive and she was kind of out of her mind. You're like, okay. And then Kenny and her go to this place and they're like, we can't take you all. And Kenny's like, wait, just take the kids. Take the little baby and take Clementine. I'll stay behind. And that goodbye drove me to man tears, and it was really good. Because although Kenny was losing his mind throughout the game, it was great to see him actually be the man you know he is deep down. It's like Boromir. It's like, yeah, Boromir dicked out for a second, but that's not what Boromir is. Boromir is the man who gave his life for Merry and Pippin. Took arrows like Mike Ehrmantraut's lawyer took shivs. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It made me forget the fact that the illusion of these Telltale games are the fact that all of these paths are ultimately herded to reach the same outcome. Except for the very end of this game, which is clearly different. They can have like 4 or 5 different endings. Which makes me think in season 3, they're going to have something that negates everything, or they're going to have a different character entirely. In the end, The Walking Dead season 2 started out a little slow in the first 2 episodes, although the first 2 episodes were very enjoyable. You do start noticing the pattern that, wait a minute, how I play really doesn't matter. It's just all about, well, it shows you how you would do it. I guess it's fair very nice in that reflective kind of way. I just wish that the choices would lead to a drastically different outcome that would stick. Like The Walking Dead 500 Days of Summer or whatever. Like, how does that feed into this? Really, it didn't do anything for the story that I noticed. I just feel like Telltale Games is like, it's gonna be relevant and shit, and thank you for $5. And it kind of irritated me that the difference wasn't so there that it's like, that's why it's different. That's why you had to play. I don't feel you did. However, The Walking Dead Season 2, episodes 3, 4, and 5 were badass. A lot of tension. It slowed down near the end, but that's where all the really tense shit within the group that I was in was happening. Not a lot of walkers, but a lot of conflict. I will say The Walking Dead Season 2 is worth buying at full price. I love the growth that Clementine goes to, and this goes perfectly with Season 1. 1 and 2 are just a great solid game right there. Buy the season pass for like $20, you'll have a blast. So if I could give a message to Telltale Games, it's that for the next one, have the actions and consequences be vastly different. Have it a different gaming experience entirely. Even if that means episode 4 is not going to tie in with episode 3, I would like to see that happen. A self-contained game where by the end, yeah, that's a completely different game. Different people are alive, different people are dead. My friend and I don't have the same game by the end. I'd love to see that shit. So The Walking Dead Season 2, have you played it? What did you think about it? Do you agree with me on the choices and actions and consequences ultimately leading to the same thing? Whatever you think, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.